Hey, and welcome back to Wheat Beat. My name is Mike. So today we're going to continue on with our experimentations. If you click the link up above, you'll see the last video that we did, which was about proofing times. And we found out that when you change the amount of time that you proof your dough, you do get a noticeable change in the outcome. So today we're going to continue on with that theme, and we're going to experiment with preferments. What are preferments? They are doughs that you make in advance, usually a day or two in advance, where you mix some flour and water and maybe a little bit of yeast, and you let it sit overnight, usually is common or even longer. What does this do? It's theoretically going to change the properties of your dough. It's going to feel a little bit different when you mix it. They call that extensibility or elasticity. When you have your final dough, your final outcome, I should say, your bread, you should be able to feel like, oh, this is a higher quality bread. It has a better smell to it, has better flavor to it. And of course, that is the most important outcome. You might also get a different volume. So you might get a bigger loaf of bread with more gases inside of it that expand it, and that has to do again with the elasticity that you're imparting onto the dough. So all of that, I would say, is kind of theoretical. I've never actually tested it, so that is the point of today's video. I'm going to make two batches of ciabatta today. One is going to be a straight dough. Straight dough means that there's no pre-ferment in it, and one with a pre-ferment, a poolish. A poolish is typically equal parts water, equal parts flour, and a tiny bit of yeast that's been sitting overnight. Here is my poolish. It's been sitting overnight, and you can see that it's ready. If you look there in the middle, you'll see, first of all, a ton of bubbles, obviously, but also you can see it's starting to collapse a little bit in the center, and that's how you know that your poolish is ready. If you looked at your poolish and it was looking very expanded and bubbly, but it wasn't starting to collapse a little bit like that, making little valleys in the center, then you might need to wait a little bit longer. 12 to 14 hours is pretty typical for a poolish. So we're going to make two batches, one with this and one without. The one with and without has no difference whatsoever. The only difference is one has poolish and one doesn't. The hydration level is the same, the quantity is the same, the mixing time is the same. Everything is 100% the same, except for pre-ferment or not. So when we're all done with this, of course, we're going to compare, and we're going to look to see if there was any difference in the volume or the crumb structure, and obviously the most important thing, was there a difference in flavor? So join me today, let's get started and see what comes out of this experiment. Here's the first batch, which is the straight dough, no pre-ferment, no poolish in this one, and we're just about done mixing it. Looks loose, just like you would expect with a ciabatta. All right, and we're all done here, and we'll just check the dough temperature, which is a little bit high at 79, but we'll make sure that the next dough is all identical. Right, this is the second batch with the pre-ferment, and we're just about done with the mixing. The first difference I'm noticing already is that the dough appears to be a little bit stronger. You can see it's pulling away from the bowl a little bit more, and I'm actually mixing it for less time by several minutes compared to the last one. So the dough does seem to be developing more quickly, which makes some sense because the poolish was fermented overnight, which does develop the gluten in that flour. So the dough is already developed to some extent before I even start. So this makes some sense. A shorter mixing time is one result of using a pre-ferment. Here's the second batch. This is with the poolish. We'll take the temperature, see how that is. And we're at 79 degrees, and so it's identical to the last one, which is good. We did mix it for less time. Less mixing is a good thing because mixing causes oxidation, which breaks down carotenoids, and it affects potentially the flavor and other properties of the dough. So this one was mixed for about a minute and a half less. It's still nice and strong, and so that's actually the first result that I'm seeing that's different with the one with the pre-ferment. But in any case, we're going to bulk ferment each of these for the same time, which in this case is 4 hours. We're going to do a fold every hour, and we'll come back to the video once we're done with the bulk fermentation. All right, so here we have the straight dough, and we'll just check temperature again. It's now down to 72, so it's come down quite a bit over the last 4 hours. We'll go ahead and put this on the work surface, separate it out into pieces, and then let it proof. All right, so I'm going to separate these out now. I cut them into about 150 gram pieces, and then I put it on a couche to let them do the final proof. So right now I'll just finish cutting these up, and by the time I finish this, the one with the pre-ferment should be ready to go. Okay, we're ready now for the poolish. I would say this looks just about the same as the last one. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll look back in the video later. We're also at 72 here, which is the same temperature as the straight dough. So now we'll go ahead and slice this up into pieces and let it proof as well. So we're putting all of the ciabattas, this is from the straight dough, into the oven, and we'll apply some steam and let it bake for about 21 minutes. And then we'll do the next batch, and then we can start our comparisons. All right, this is batch number 2. This is the version with the pre-ferment, the poolish. Up until now, I have not noticed really any difference at all in terms of the texture and handling of the dough. So we might start seeing differences when we slice them open. So everything's done here, and we have two sides. This side is the straight dough. This side over here is the one that was made with poolish. And when I look at these, I am struggling to see what the difference might be. I'll step back just a little bit and show it in a single frame. But this is the one was made with the pre-ferment. This one was without pre-ferment. They look almost identical to me in terms of the darkness of the bake and the height, the expansion of the dough. When I look at it from the side, I don't really think that we had more gas or expansion on one or the other. So the volume looks about the same on both sides, and there really is no difference that I can tell. The only difference I saw up until this point was just during the mixing. There was a little less mixing required for the one with the pre-ferment, but that was about it. So I'm going to start cutting some of these open. We'll compare them side by side. Okay, here they are cut open, and I selected 3 from each side. 3 here are from the ones with the pre-ferment, 3 are straight dough, and I've labeled them. Now, take a look at all of these critically, because these are not in a particular order, and try to see in the video here if you can tell any difference at all between these 6. I matched these pairs thinking that they looked kind of similar. So when you look at this, maybe pause the video and see if you can tell which numbers are associated with which batch. The first one here was straight dough, pre-ferment number 2, number 3 pre-ferment, number 4 straight dough, number 5 straight dough, number 6 with pre-ferment. So in each case here, if you look down this row, there's either going to be a straight or pre-ferment on each one of these. So you can just look, for example, right here very critically and say, do you see a difference in the crumb structure between these two? And then look at these two, and then these two here a little bit more critically. So when I look at these, I am going to say honestly, I do not see a difference. I think that the crumb structure is very nice. I'm very happy with the results on both. I don't think that there's anything substantially different between the two. You could say that there's a lot larger cells, air cells on this one. This is the one with the poolish than this one, but honestly, I don't think that's true. These are really nice, irregular, and large air cells. Same thing goes here. You have some small, some large, but they're largely the same. So I think the only thing that's left here really is flavor. So I'm going to stop again. I'm going to do that hard task of tasting the different kinds, and I'll report back in a moment to tell you if I think there's any difference in taste. So the results are in. I did share the bread and did a blind taste test with 3 other people, and they had no idea what they were eating, but I gave them one and then I gave them the other without giving any hints, and actually, they did taste a difference between the two pretty consistently. The one with the pre-ferment, the poolish, they felt had a little bit of sour notes to it. And that actually makes sense because the pre-ferment, as you may remember, is fermenting for about 12 to 14 hours. And one of the byproducts is acid. And the acid obviously gives a sour flavor to it. Now, it wasn't substantial at all. We're not talking about a sourdough bread. We're just talking about a very, very subtle note of sourness, which does add some flavor and aroma. And everyone that tried it felt like the one with the poolish was ever so slightly better, but it was very, very minor difference. They really had to concentrate to notice there was any difference at all. And I will be completely frank, I'd like to think of myself as this very sophisticated palate because I'm this baker. I tasted absolutely no difference between the two. I'm just being straight up honest. For me, it was the same whether it had the pre-ferment or not. Even after I realized that the one with the pre-ferment might be very slightly more acidic, I still didn't taste any difference. So we know that in this case, it didn't make a whole lot of difference. And for me personally, I don't think I would even bother with a pre-ferment if I'm making ciabatta. But if I was making baguettes or a different kind of bread that had a lower hydration, you know, the ciabatta is very high hydration. This is 80% hydration. For every 1 gram of flour, there's 8.8 grams of water, which is a lot of water for a bread. And normally bread is in the high 60s to low 70% in terms of hydration. So if I was making baguettes or making just a regular loaf of bread, I might have noticed the properties, the way it stretches, the way it comes together, the strength of the dough. It might have been a little bit different between the one that had the pre-ferment or not. So in all fairness, this was probably not the best bread in the world to check for how it affects the behavior of the dough. Also, on that note, different pre-ferments impart different characteristics, you could say, on the dough, and at least that's what it is academically. So like a biga is a much lower hydration pre-ferment. In theory, it should make your final dough stronger, and there's all sorts of stuff out there in the literature that says that these are the kinds of things that might happen from the pre-ferments. So we might continue on with these experiments and see if any of that is true, but so far I have not seen any difference at all in terms of the properties or the flavor that is worth the effort. And so the effort is what? It's basically you have to remember the night before to prepare this pre-ferment. You have to time it correctly the following day so it doesn't basically over-ferment and incorporate it. And it's kind of a hassle, I think. It's not a really big deal, but it's another step in the process. And sometimes I just wake up in the morning and I think, oh gosh, you know, I need to make bread, or somebody has ordered some bread for me, and I don't want to have to now say, oh, sorry, I can't get that for you today because I have to make my pre-ferment, my poolish, which most people don't know what that is, and it just sounds like I'm using a bad word. Also, the other thing to consider is that I used a pretty standard amount of pre-ferments. About 30% of the total weight was pre-ferment. But you could try something higher. You could try 40%, 50%, maybe even higher than that, and you might see an even greater reaction in the bread and in the flavor. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. I found it kind of interesting. It's going to save me a step, frankly, in the future. And it's always nice to do these experiments using professional equipment. And I intend to do a lot more of these. So I'd love it if you subscribe and comment below if you have any suggestions for experiments that you'd like me to try. So until we meet next time, go out and bake something.